Welcome back to the Critical Moves podcast. This is episode 81, and I wanted to start by saying thank you very much to everybody who sent in questions for episode 80, which you can listen to in our now extensive back catalogue. So thanks everybody for your questions. I thought it was a really good episode, and we're here again, like we are every Friday. And today I'm joined by Jack and Joe. Gentlemen, how are you doing?
Hello. I'm doing really well. How are you both?
I'm great.
Joe's great. I'm great too. Today, I wanted to talk about something. Actually, to be fair, I'll be honest. Jack wanted to talk about this, which is Stellaris. I don't know if I said that right. I'm going to alternate between Stellaris and Stellaris. Stellaris Season 10, which was announced last month, I think. We're going to have a look at that in some detail, what's coming out in Season 10, what's coming out with Nomads, which is the next major expansion, which I think is out on the 15th of June. But before we look at Stellaris, I wanted to have a quick little sidebar about Beyond Our Reason. There's been some furor in the community, and Tim's not here to give us the inside track on this, in relation to being commercially hijacked. Have you gents seen this?
There's some upset going on in the community right now because Bar has always been like open source, like crowd developed, and now there's some. I guess there was a leak that came out that Beyond All Reason was looking to commercialize in some way. I mean, we know we've done an interview. I did an interview with Patak, with Tim, so Taku and Tim, and they told me that they were planning to commercialize the game in some way by creating a full campaign. So it's supposed to go on storefronts in that way. That's what that means.
Yeah. So some dude, I think it must be from the Beyond Our Reason community, and I can understand, and we've spoken to Tim about this, so I can understand why they want to commercialize, because for a long time Bar has not had a true single player element to it, and I think that the idea behind this commercialization, using the word that the Bar community have been using here, is that it's going to give them the influx of money that they need in order to create a decent single player experience. Because the issue you have is that the Beyond Our Reason community is all multiplayer gamers, or mostly multiplayer gamers, so they're only really interested in the multiplayer aspect. So trying to get multiplayer gamers to put together an effective and enticing single player experience is difficult. So if they go to publisher, and I think Hooded Horse have been mentioned as the publisher of choice, and I think that there's contract talks being go on. If they go to a publisher, they get the funds to be able to develop a single player campaign. And I think that what the plan was is that they would leave the multiplayer side as free to play, but the single player campaigns would be paid content. Is that a good business model?
This might be controversial, but I don't see why anyone would even complain about that. What you have now stays free, right?
Yeah.
So they just build on something that is already free, provide a paid alternative that most of the players that are playing don't even really want. Correct?
Yeah.
I'm not going to come down on someone who likes to complain. That's fine. That's what the internet's for. But I don't see the problem myself, especially if there's a chance that some of this monies that come eventually turn into more for the multiplayer campaign. You would think it would. Something would eventually trickle down. I know we don't believe in trickle down economics, but maybe this one time it would actually work. I don't know. But it worked in Dwarf Fortress. I mean, Dwarf Fortress went paid and it's better than ever. Now, it's not the same model, but still.
Yeah, I think the difference between Dwarf Fortress and Beyond Our Reason is that Beyond Our Reason has been built for 20 years by volunteers, and the commercialization of the project puts into the ownership of the hands from what I can read, and this is all just from a Reddit post, but Taku has responded to the Reddit post, so there's some more information on there. Beyond Our Reason was built by volunteers, and now suddenly are they going to transfer ownership away from the community into the hands of 5 individuals who are then going to potentially rake in the big bucks? I understand the crux of the argument. The argument is, look, we as a community have built this product, and now you are going to make money off the back of our hard work, and they think it should remain as a community project. The flip side of that is, if it remains community project, they won't get the funding that they need from a publisher in order to produce a single player campaign. So what do you do?
Think of Google. Google did not create the internet, but Google makes a lot of money using the internet, correct?
It
It's kind of a
does.
stretch, but think of that. Like, think of all the companies that make money off the internet. Beyond all reason, the new team is not specifically going out and saying, this is now ours. We charge for what you've been getting for free. They're saying, we're going to take this thing that exists, we're going to create something new and charge for it.
If you're interested in coming to chat to us about the whole Beyond All Reason situation, do so. We've got a Discord. Come and join us. Come and say hello. And if you're part of the Beyond All Reason community and you're listening to this, come and tell us what you think. And I think that at some point in the near future, we'll probably get Tim and we'll try and get Taku back on and we can cover this in more detail. But the reason we're here, drum roll, the reason we're here is for Stellaris Season 10. Jack, you wanted to cover this. What stood out from the Season 10 announcement for you?
Ooh, I might jump the gun here then, because it wasn't actually the major DLC coming out this summer or the expansion, like mechanics pack that was coming out later this year. It was actually the scenario packs that they announced coming out at the end of the year.
Yeah, they're part of Season 10.
Well, I know, but you asked me what stood out to me about it, and I think what stands out is that they've changed their DLC model, and we have a new type of DLC releasing at the end of the year.
All right, okay. So talk to me more about that. What do you mean they've changed the DLC model? Because we've had scenario packs before.
No. We've had what I would refer to as a mechanics expansion, right? So in the past, we've had, I think a good example of that is like, what was it, the Galactic Storms DLC? It's a DLC that introduces a mechanic, the Wandering or Stationary Galactic Storms, introduces new origins for empires. It's a whole new system for empires to interact with if they choose to, or will inherently impact the game so long as you enable them. And it gives you tons of anomalies, which I think you could consider scenarios. But these scenario packs, I think that's what they're referred to, right? That's their official terminology.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Yeah, the scenario packs, they're not anomalies. They are not a part of the base game. They are a separate game mode for Stellaris now.
Oh, I see. Right. I was thinking of them a bit like the story packs that they have done,
Mm-hmm.
which are essentially just additional content which gets thrown into the game, anomalies and
Right.
archaeological digs and things like that. But this isn't. These are just entirely new ways of playing the game.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, that's interesting.
But see, what's interests me about that, and like I said, we're kind of jumping the gun here because we're talking about the latest DLC, like the last 2 DLCs to come out in Season 10. So we've skipped past the 2 big budget DLCs that they've announced.
That's okay.
But these scenario packs, to talk about why they stood out to me, I mean, you're talking about introducing new game modes to Stellaris, which does create a new way to play the game. It creates at least 4 of them, right? Because they've at least now announced 4, 2 for each of the scenario packs. They're releasing at the same time. They're both $6 a piece, or like one double cheeseburger, and with like no sides or anything, right? So like just a double cheeseburger by itself, you'll be thirsty. But
Where do you get your cheeseburgers from? That's an expensive cheeseburger.
America.
Sorry, continue. Sorry.
It's probably Five Guys. It sounds like Five Guys.
the thing that gets me about these scenario packs too is that when you read them, they're for multiplayer and single player. That they have something for both. So, for example, I think it's in scenario pack 1. They're introducing a roguelike game mode for single player. So you're encouraged to use the new Nomads DLC content that's coming out way earlier in the year, and you're going to play as a nomad, traverse the galaxy, and eventually, as you acquire things, somehow like a roguelike that you're building onto your empire, you're encouraged to leave your current galaxy and then jump to a new galaxy where it generates a new galaxy with new civs on the board. And I mean, that's like inherently interesting. That's a new way to play the game. And then the multiplayer aspect is it's like a Civ or a an Age of Empires. It's like a pre-built map with pre-built civs on the map and a pre-configured economy so that the 4 or 5 or however many players that are in the game have their economies set so that they're encouraged to build up their navies and just go to war with each other as quickly as possible. It's a PvP focused multiplayer scenario. So these are preloaded Stellaris saves basically with new mechanics tied into it, potentially new menus that you're paying $6 a DLC for, and you're playing at least 2 scenarios, one for single player and one for multiplayer in each one. And that's interesting because they're both coming out at the same time. There's 2 of them. One lets you be the Crisis right off the bat in a Civ in a game that's already like towards the end game Crisis. You play as the Unbidden. That's interesting to me.
It is, and I think there's a couple of new ways to play the game, a couple of new ways to play Stellaris in season 10, and these scenario packs is just one of them. Joe, I'll read out what these scenario packs are, and you give us your thoughts on these. So, scenario pack 1, it says, embark on a new set of galactic challenges, experience curated high-stakes standalone adventures that push your strategic limits, from a nomadic roguelike odyssey across the stars to high-octane, combat-focused multiplayer experiences. Interested?
Yeah, I am actually. The roguelike one sounds really fun. I know people have been calling for Nomads for a long time, so I haven't played Stellaris in years, spoiler, but that could maybe bring me back, the Nomad thing. That seems unique enough, and I love the idea of this new DLC that's coming that gives you the roguelike experience. I never was a roguelike player, but in my aged wisdom, I've become more interested in that.
Well, the second one, scenario pack 2, says rewrite the rules of engagement, dive into curated. Is that just the same intro? No, it isn't. Re- dive into
Similar.
curated. It's almost like it was written by a machine empire. Uh, Rewrite the rules of engagement. Dive into curated high-stakes standalone experiences designed to test your mastery of the stars, whether leading. Now, this does sound like it was written by a machine empire. Whether leading an ultimate extra-dimensional invasion or battling your friends in a race for dominance, these scenarios offer a fresh, distilled way to play Stellaris. I do like the idea of playing as the endgame Crisis, especially if it's like a very, very mature, populated, and difficult universe or galaxy that you're jumping into. I think that'd be great.
So it says play as the Crisis. Whatever, but I feel like that description tells you everything but nothing, if that makes sense. I don't know. I'm way more interested in the first one.
Unfortunately, with the announcement, and this is kind of weird that this has happened, but Paradox is, when it first got announced, Paradox had like a very short article on their website just announcing all of them, no information. We're a few weeks away now, and they've since updated. They've had new articles come out with a little bit, basically what Al and I have read. But the whole time since the announcement, Steam has had the most information hidden away into their season 10 bundle. So I can at least tell you that like the names of the scenarios are Vanguards is the name from scenario pack 1. It says Vanguards play as a single player curated roguelike experience, and the multiplayer game mode is titled Arcade because you're going into a pre-configured game and doing PvP with your friends. And then for scenario pack 2, the first scenario is titled Unbidden, and it says play as the Crisis, starting in a late game galaxy and attempt to invade powerful empires as the Unbidden. And then the second game mode, which is for multiplayer, says King of the Hill. Stellaris gameplay distilled in a small but fair map to challenge your friends in competitive experiences as you try to dominate the galaxy in a few hours of intense expansion wars.
This entire season 10, and this is the 10th anniversary, isn't it, as well? This entire season 10 it seems like it's built around different ways to play Stellaris. And you've mentioned the scenarios and the multiplayer, which I have absolutely no interest in playing multiplayer, by the way. Don't ever ask me to do that because I'm not going to do it. But the Nomads,
Unless
which
we
is
get to 2,000 subscribers.
no, it's not
Okay,
going to
sorry,
happen.
keep going.
If we get to 2,000 subscribers, you can play multiplayer against Tim. All right. Nomads. This is a really interesting concept for Stellaris because, like many Forex games, like many Paradox games, Stellaris is a map painter. Yeah. You start small and you spread your color across the map as you conquer new worlds and different empires and take out your enemies. And suddenly, there's no, from what I can tell from the Nomads thing, there's no conquering of planets. You don't have planetary bases. You exist completely on these arc ships. Is it going to work? People have been playing Stellaris for a long, long time, and they're used to a particular way of playing. Is this going to be a successful expansion for them?
I don't think so at first, but I think it will improve. I think that, like personally, a lot of people have been asking for Nomads. That's for sure. I think this is part of their intention with the 10-year anniversary. Tackle a highly requested feature set with a bunch of flavor. And they've also they talked about, to skip ahead a little bit, some new mega structures that are coming with it. So like you have arc ships as mega structures that you build instead of like the Voidborn origin lets you spawn in a like basically space stations. You now can have arc ships. And another mega structure is like a laser that lets you spend your entire energy credits bank into a giant laser onto a planet. So it's like basically if you're an economy focused empire, you could just use your entire supply of energy credits you've maintained so far. So those are both cool, right? Those appealed to me. Personally, though, I'm not crazy about the Nomads thing. I'm not, but that means that I will probably interact with it in the future as things get ironed out and enjoy it for a run or two. But I would raise you this, right? When I looked at the Aquatics DLC, I still have not gotten into that stuff personally. I didn't find it very interesting. I didn't think it was going to be that appealing to people. I thought that when it came out, I thought the portraits that released with it for the aquatic empires looked really silly and were some of the worst that they've had. I don't feel the same way now. And you recently on the last episode said that you played as aquatics.
Yeah, but the aquatics it was just a species pack. It wasn't a an expansion.
Well,
The
true, but it has individual mechanics tied to them, like the toxoids or the volcanoids or whatever they are. Like they give you new types of planets to spawn on. They give you new anomalies. They give you new feature sets because you use energy or food a different way.
Mhm.
Like it inherently affects the way your empire plays, I should say, which I think is comparable to not maybe the entire game changing for the sake of nomads, but if you play as a nomadic empire, it's probably largely going to be the same, except there are just different considerations.
Yeah, it's not going to be the same, is it? I mean, the difference between an aquatic and a humanoid species is superficial. It doesn't fundamentally change the way that your empire plays. You just have an ocean world, and you go fishing rather than farming. So it's a flavor rather than a transformation. Whereas nomads, from what I can tell, and this is out on the 15th of June, so that's in what, 4 weeks, something like that. Nomads is completely changing the way that you play. This is no if you're playing as nomads and the the page says build no borders, claim no worlds. Stellaris has always been about building borders and claiming worlds. So this is a complete fundamental change in the game mechanics.
Do you think it really is build nothing, or do you think it's more like minus 60% habitability for your people on planets, like it is for Voidborn? That's what I'll be interested in.
If it is, I think that's a bit of a cop out. But then again, I suppose
Mm-hmm.
I suppose if you think there'd be no reason why, if you live on a arc ship, you couldn't also live on a planet. I suppose So maybe it will that be maybe it will be like the Voidborn origin.
Base bones don't work on planets.
Maybe it'd be like Wally, the Disney Pixar movie, where they're all just
Mm-hmm.
insanely
Yeah,
fat. Because
that's
they've
for
been
sure
used to
happening.
They've been used to the lighter gravity, so maybe that's going to be the way that it works. Maybe it will be like the habitat dwellers. That might sell it short if it does that, because I do like the idea of these arc ships, and some of the concept art is brilliant. It looks like the three prongs coming out the ship. They look like sections of a ring world. So that just gives you some sense of the scale of what these are. I do like the concept. I think it's a really fascinating science fiction concept. I just hope that it gets implemented properly. But we'll find out in 4 weeks, or will
Mm-hmm.
we, Jack? Are you going to buy it, Jack?
Well, yes. But I do think, yeah, I'll probably buy it. But I do think that what they'll do in the Paradox way is they'll probably introduce a whole new feature set that goes along with being a nomadic empire that incentivizes not being on a planetoid. So the idea, right, is that if you're on a planet, you're playing as an empire. If you're a nomad, you're probably going to be more something similar to like the artisan troops of the game or the research enclaves, where you'll probably like. Have either of you two played as an adventurer in Crusader Kings 3?
I have.
Well, it's kind of fantastic for Al, the uninitiated. Like in Crusader Kings 3, you're just getting a map of like the known world for the most part. And then you're playing as either a mayor or a duke or a king, and you get to, you know, all this, and you have the court and the politics and everything. But the moment you play as an adventurer, as this landless ruler, you have basically a very different game. You you start somewhere on the map. You have a camp that you have to like slightly construct with buildings, and then you interact with the game not by having a court and not by having internal politics in that way, but by being like Mountain Blade, like a mercenary. You can just see these flags on the map,
Mm-hmm.
and you travel there, and you can choose to use your character points like an RPG to interact with anomalies like Stellaris, which are in these cases contracts for Crusader Kings, and you can build wealth or build an army, and then it's very cool. Like it's a ton of fun, and it's actually built into the system so that you could go from being an adventurer to a landed king or a landed ruler, and then eventually in one save file and one character somehow get all the way to being the ruler of the Holy Roman Empire. I mean, that's cool. I would suggest that Nomads is probably going to be similar. I would think that they would
Yeah.
incentivize you to have arc ships and megastructures that go along with that. So, Joe, one of the things that they've mentioned is you do build things as a nomad. You can build way stations within other civs borders to build what they call like a waybound network that allows you to travel between those points faster and mark your journey. So in the current game now, you can have an anomaly where like a spacefaring empire, a nomadic empire can contact you and say, hire us as mercenaries or hire us to do this or that. And you can say yes or no, or sometimes they'll raid you because other empires pay them to. I
Mm-hmm.
think that stuff will all transfer to being a player. I think you'll be able to make money off of that stuff.
Maybe there's, as a nomad, maybe they introduce one of their, I forget what it's called. I haven't played in so long, but I think you could put points into, and when you eventually get to the top of it, you get a great ability. What are those called again? Those trees you can put points into?
Traditions and ascension
Traditions,
perks.
yes. So maybe there's some sort of tree, and one of the ascension perks, it you can either go give up planets fully and your ships are super more buffed, or you can go the other way and you can eventually take over somewhere like you can in Crusader Kings. So maybe the nomad style starts that way, but there's trees that allow you to specialize in either, okay, we're staying nomads, or we're gonna we're gonna become an empire. I could see that now that you're saying it. Someone's gonna be right in a month.
I guess we'll find out. I think it's definitely going to be the kind of game mode that forces you to play tall rather than having this sprawling empire which covers half of the map, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
they're going to be very clever in order to. They're going to have to make it worthwhile to concentrate all of your civilization into an arc ship or a series of arc ships. They're going to have to make it very worthwhile to do so. So there must be bonuses because I know that if you play, you can either play tall, where you have a very small number of planets, but they're all very well developed and specialized, or you spread your net wide. This is going to force you into the tall way of playing. It's looking. To be fair, Jack, I mean, when we first talked about this, I was like, I'm not sure that I would really like to try Nomads, but the more that we've talked about it, the more I'm kind of interested in doing so.
Me too.
Yep. One of the things I thought was pretty neat was they mentioned in maybe it was a video that they released with the announcement. They mentioned that their intention was to make it so that the existing origins of the game, or as many of them as possible, were applicable to being the nomads. So even ones that seem maybe not the ones that seem inherently tied to being on a planet, which you would think would be most of them, but they said that their goal was to get as many of them as possible to function with being nomads. So they're just going to have be rewritten in their descriptions or like their flavor text if you start off in an arc ship.
Joe, you could be the Tyranids. You could be a traveling, devouring swarm.
Bobs. I'm going to be the Bobaverse. You don't know what that means.
I know what it means, but I don't know what it means. I know that it exists, but it's never something which has floated my boat, even though you talk so eloquently about it.
I'm sad. I'm sad for you. I'm not going to buy it. I'm going to do 1 month of the expansion $9.99 subscription. You get everything with that, don't you?
Yes.
I'm excellent at canceling things, so I'm going to do 1 month.
Are you really, or are you being sarcastic?
No, I am. I do like 3 or 4 calendars, 3 or 4 days in a row to make sure I don't forget.
So this is out on the 15th of June, okay, and it does look interesting. So how's about we all have a stab at it, and we can come back in a couple of months, and we can have a bit of a deep dive into what we thought of it, whether it worked, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Yeah.
The next expansion that they're putting out is called Willpower. That's coming out at the end of the year, probably around the same time as your scenario packs are, Jack.
Maybe they might do the scenario packs at the very end of the year, and maybe this one maybe just 3 or so months after Nomads, but this one is pretty interesting because there's not a whole lot of information on it, but it seems like an ethics rework.
It reminds me of the spirituality path the Willpower one does. I wonder if it's going to be similar idea, but obviously different flavor.
So that was the psionics, wasn't it? Which was a ascension path. I mean, there's nothing that suggests it's going to be an ascension path. It says shaped minds rule the stars in a galaxy where borders fade, ideas endure. In Stellaris willpower, your ethics evolve into powerful ideologies capable of reshaping entire civilizations. I mean, it's not jumping out at me with the same kind of excitement as Nomads does, but maybe that's because they haven't given us very much about it yet. And it does say Q4.
Makes me wonder if they're going to have to do significant rework to the diplomacy system then. If you're going to be shaping the galaxy with your ethics, wouldn't you think with your will that would involve diplomacy? What a world we could live in where diplomacy is good in Stellaris. What a world. What a dream.
Where diplomacy actually did anything. Because
No.
it's poor. It's the one part of the game which really disappoints me is the diplomacy. I was playing today actually, and I was trying to play quite isolationist and stay out of the many wars, but there was one of my custom empires which was playing as well, and I really liked them. The fish people from the aquatics species pack, Jack, you'd like them, and one of the nearby, I can't remember which one it was, but they attacked the fish people, and I was like, I don't want you to attack the fish people, but I would love to see whether you could say to the fish people, "Hey, I will come and join the war on your behalf." It's almost like once the war has started, there's no way of adding additionals to that war. It's very siloed. I think the and maybe it's because of the uh, war exhaustion and all that kind of stuff. But I'd love to see some additional things brought in one of these expansions where it makes some serious changes to diplomacy and what you could actually do as the defender of the galaxy in order to protect the weaker people. Because I don't want defensive pacts with people and all that kind of stuff, but I want to be able to pick and choose who to stick up for.
Well, you can do that in some of their other games, can't you?
I don't know. Can you?
You can in Victoria. In Victoria 3, it happens all the time, but the mechanic is sphere of influence, I believe. Like, you have to be connected to it somehow. So maybe you would have to have a trade agreement with them or something like that. But as long as there's a connection, you can jump right in Victoria 3. So maybe something like that.
It'd be good. It would be a good introduction. Jack, have you seen any more about this Willpower DLC, or have we just got the two sentences which are on the Paradox Interactive webpage?
I'm not entirely sure if this can be much different than what you read on the article, but Steam says shape minds, rule stars, in the vast expanse of the cosmos, borders are mere lines drawn on a map. Ideas, on the other hand, have no such limits. Your empire was founded on its ethics, the convictions that determined its course. Skipping through, it says introducing Stellaris Willpower, the expansion that turns your societal beliefs into a galactic force. You are no longer only a ruler of systems, but a uniter of minds. You will erect monuments and megastructures that demonstrate what your society values can accomplish. You truly can become the thought leader of the galaxy.
I'm not sure how I feel about that. It seems a bit wishy washy. I know they've given us very little to go on. Nomads is, but by the sounds of it, is huge in terms of the changes. This seems to be, I don't know, like would you get like a Civ style cultural victory or something like that?
Yeah, so I think what this is, and there isn't a lot of information, so I am assuming, but I would raise you this. If Nomads is their investment into a highly requested community feature that they had supposedly been working on for quite a while, I think this is the same thing. And what I would think is one of the most requested features, which would have been diplomacy, but unfortunately, I don't think this is going to touch diplomacy, was factions. Because factions in Stellaris are completely useless by most accounts. Um, the interaction between factions, internal politics, your ethics that you use, even the system they had of like having the council of being able to like hire on the leading minds of your nation of your empire to have certain roles. I think it's going to be a rework of that. I think what they will do is they will try to do the Stellaris branded method of touching as many systems as possible with the new mechanic. And if I put on my game design hat, and this is really me assuming, but I think they're going to add in a belief mechanic or like a ideology mechanic. So essentially it will be a meter or a series of menus that are monitoring paths that you take to interact with the galaxy, maybe through diplomacy, maybe, but probably through supporting factions, internal politics, laws, and a feature of the like migration system that's in the game that's kind of pertinent but not really used that often. And so what I think will happen is you'll just be given a sense of how many people in the galaxy at any given time within your empire or not within your empire are affected by something that you're doing in your government, something that you're doing as a civ, because Stellaris is science fiction, and so much of our empires are based on personalizing, like characterizing our empires in very science fiction ways. Like everyone in your empire is a 1000% fanatical spiritualist, or everyone in your empire is 1000% a subjugated inline hive mind robot. There is no fracturing except for when anomalies occur or when certain things happen in the game that you don't manage, sure. But generally, you're characterized by those traits for hundreds of years in the game. So, what if they're introducing mechanics? Because what it does say here is adopting an ideology is not without its risks. However, Left unchecked, it can radicalize colonies and spark insurrection, but when nurtured with care, the right ideology has the power to sway entire civilizations. So what I think it will happen is it will affect as many systems as possible by basically giving you a chart of how many other empires or how much of the population of other empires are affected by an ideology that you are spreading. Whether that be spiritualist, whether it be through a faction, whether it be political, whether it be something else.
I do like the internal politics idea because I think that that's something which is, as you say, the factions. I'm aware the faction mechanics is there, and when I get a pop up to say a new faction has developed in your empire, I just close the box. I don't read them, and I've never bothered to play with them. And I think that maybe it's because you kind of you set your custom empire with its ethics, and the factions are, and I have in the past looked into the factions, and if you, so say for example, if you are a authoritarian empire, you can promote the spiritualist faction, do the things that they want you to do, like close borders or do no expansionist wars or whatever, and then that faction will rise in prominence, and eventually you can ethics shift from authoritarian to spiritualist. So I understand how the mechanic works, but to be fair, I've set up this custom empire and I ain't changing it. So it would be really cool, and I do like that idea, if you have a new faction spawns and it's influenced by external factors. So if you're going to war or you're getting beat in a war, the pacifist faction rises to prominence. No more wars. All the anti-war woke nonsense, and you risk becoming a pacifist empire if you don't manage that properly, if you don't handle that properly. I do think that you're right. I know we just said earlier that politics is kind of needs a refresh, but internal politics needs a much bigger and much more severe refresh than what the external politics does. So maybe you're onto something there, mate. And see, I was like, this doesn't sound very good, but now I'm really interested. And you could be completely wrong, but I think you should go work for Paradox, because I would play the shit out of that.
Thank you. Thank you. I did want to mention, right, when we did our Victoria 3 episode recently, Tim said something that surprised me. When I played Victoria 3 recently, it felt like very natural because when you play the game, you have these factions pop up. So, like Victoria 3, we mentioned in the episode, you would know because you edited it, but we talk about how Victoria 3 is not just an economic simulator anymore, it's also now like an economics internal politics simulator. Because when you play the game, you have these factions that are a part of the government, so like the bourgeois, the landowners, the peasants, and others like the industrialists and such. And so the way that it makes sense to me is that you kind of need to pass laws out of a list of laws available to you at any time on Victoria. You need to choose laws on the list that progressively become more modern because they seem to be inherently better. Like if you start off with no public schooling or no schooling whatsoever, it makes sense that you kind of have to move on to like religious schooling and then maybe public schooling, and then eventually you can do private schooling. And then there's a choice, right? Like public schooling might be better than private schooling. The point that I'm getting at though is that it surprised me to learn that interacting with the series of laws in Victoria and then trying to pass a law because it's better for your government and economy, and it tells you that you can see everything. It's like when you shift ethics in Stellaris, it'll tell you like this is how much your resources are going to be affected by doing this. And when you see all greens in Victoria, you're like, well, of course, let me go from no schools to public schools. Then people are smarter, and then they can work in factories. And then when you do that, the factions are like, we don't like this. And so you have to appease them by signing fine print into the contract that supports them, or agreeing, if you support this law, I'll pass a law that you support personally within the next 5 years. That stuff felt very natural. It felt like a good interplay of internal politics. And then Tim said, oh, all of that was added in with an internal politics expansion. And so I'm like, okay, so when the game came out, you just had this list of laws that you passed, and then the factions didn't even bother with it. But now you need to appease these factions, or otherwise what happens, like what happens to me, is you piss off some factions and then they militarize and then form an insurrection on your nation, and so Japan has to go to war with the samurai because you've pissed off the militarists, and so now you're trying to survive a coup. And so, anyways, the way that I imagine that might happen in Stellaris is the same way, essentially. Like maybe they will introduce not just a system of ideology that influences people. What if they introduce mechanics where you're progressing within your empire, maybe even with the technologies, right? Where as you progress or choose certain technologies, like rare technologies that can be dangerous, that might piss people off. What if there's a faction of people who are anti cybernetics, and then every time you research one of those technologies, which is just inherently important for Stellaris, to just get as many of them as possible, but you're pissing off these factions. So now you have to play with new systems.
And also the galactic community as well. You join the galactic community and you pass a law, so you pass or you don't challenge a resolution which comes through the Senate or something like that. You're going to annoy one of your factions doing it that way. It is a very interesting idea, and I appreciate this is just supposition,
Yeah, we're making this
until
up,
you,
people. We're assuming.
yeah, yeah. Don't take it, don't take it as gospel. But I think that from what you've said, it does sound quite realistic. People have been crying out for an internal politics rework, for an external politics rework as well, and it would make sense if you're going to change one or if you're going to fix one, then you fix them both at the same time because very, I suppose, very similar systems. So maybe that's going to be the way that it goes.
Now, I do think the other part of this, right, is that this one is more appealing to me by the concept of not what I'm imagining, but just what it even says. I'm interested in what I also think is very realistic, which is they mention you will erect monuments and megastructures that demonstrate what your society and values can accomplish. So I do think that even at the end of the day, they might actually kind of piss me off with this DLC, to be honest with you. But if they take this as an opportunity with the 10-year anniversary to give us an expansion pack that gives us tons of new monument types for city building or for planetary buildings and new megastructures that serve cultural or artistic or societal purposes that aren't things like Dyson spheres on Dyson spheres or Dyson swarms or like massive Halo array ring worlds or something like that, right? If they give us more like wonders like Civ, I hate to make that reference, but wonders where you're actually benefiting your society by building a megastructure. Like I think they have like the Grand Archive and stuff. That stuff is cool to me. Like it gives you a
Mm.
reason to play the game multiple times because no matter what, there are some times where I'm just like, okay, building a forge, a mega forge is kind of like inherently good. So, but building a Grand Archive is not. Building a galactic zoo isn't for everybody. But if you're a spiritualist empire and you build like a galactic temple where everybody's supposed to go commune with the shroud because it just exists in the Stellaris world, then that would be pretty cool. Like you're the same person that has the galactic market. If that made a bigger deal to your empire and was a physical thing that you interacted with, like the Grand Archive or Zoo with a menu, and a galactic temple was something. So like that stuff, I'm still assuming. But that if they take the opportunity to add in at least just the megastructures, that's cool to me. What will piss me off though is I don't want the game to get more complicated, even more complicated, with the idea that if I don't do certain things that I normally would do in Stellaris, like if I'm just playing the game and I'm pissing people off, one of my colonies is going to revolt because that already happens whenever they come out with an update. And I don't understand how the population system works anymore or what the new resource expectations are for things. Like every time I play this game after a major update, I have colonies revolting or insurrection or anomalies like my crime is going up. That shit happens all the time. I don't want it to happen more because I piss off pacifists and then so they what? Militarize? Like I don't know what's going to happen.
They do a sit in. There's no storming the capital here. They just former daisy chain and sync kumbaya or something like that. But the idea of better megastructures, I do like the idea of that, because I think you only have the mega art installation. I think is the only one which affects Unity in Stellaris at the moment. Uh, Everything else seems to be pushed towards economics or military. So you're right that there is and we have to remember though, Jack. We have to remember it's a 4x game. It's not a grand strategy game, which is and I think that one of the things that Tim mentioned, it might have been in the Victoria 3 episode, it might have been in episode 80. I can't remember. We do these one a week, and he said. Actually, it was episode 80 because Drex had asked a question, "What is a 4x?" and we were kind of scratching our heads again. And I think that the way that Tim described it was he said that the grand strategy game has much more detail in the management of your empire. And, Stellaris, you settle a planet and you put buildings on the planet and it generates resources and that's it. Whereas Victoria 3, from what you've described, much more intricate, much more involved. Yeah, you don't want Stellaris to become as complex as a grand strategy game because that would defeat the object of it being a 4X game. But would a little bit of extra complexity be such a bad thing?
I think it depends on its implementation. For example, I bring up the Galactic Storms earlier. I've heard Stellaris YouTubers go on to say that they hated, like people who make content for this game regularly, say that they did not like or they did not know what Paradox was thinking coming out with this Galactic Storms DLC. They're annoying, yada yada. I think they add value to the game, and sure, they can negatively affect your empire. They can wander through, they can mess things up. I never noticed them objectively affecting my empire significantly to the point that I wish they weren't there. If anything, they provide some visual quality to the game. That's a system I know I could interact with at some point if I wanted to. There are origins tied into it that I actually think are pretty cool. But as a system, it added complexity. But the reason I quote it is because it added complexity if you interact with it. Like for example, the Psionics DLC we were just talking about, like Shadow of the Shroud, that came out this past year with the last season, I think. It adds stuff in that affects the whole game, but the complexity is not if you play as a spiritualist empire, if you do not interact with these systems, you cannot play the same game that you did before. But if you play as a spiritualist empire, you can now interact with the shroud in ways that benefit you and can harm you in the future. I want a prompt. I want something that says if you interact with this system that's been added in by an expansion, it will affect your game either positively because you know what you're doing or negatively because you're figuring it out. And that's it. I don't want to get on Stellaris like when you have a big mainline update and the naval capacity changes are different and the population system is different and the way cities, like planets build buildings, are different. I don't want those things that you have to relearn or inherently affect the way you play the game.
Hmm. But that happens every update. It's a Paradox thing. And I think that we covered this when we talked about Europa Universalis 5, I think, in one of the episodes. And we said that I think somebody had said on Steam, this will be a great game in 2 years. Because every time they bring out an update, they change things and you have to relearn what you already knew. It's just the Paradox way, isn't it? I think it was when we did the
Yeah.
Paradox episode, we talked about this.
I mean, yeah, I suppose. What I did want to ask you though is I'm not sure if you've caught it from this announcement, but another talking point, not necessarily tied to the expansions, but they are yet again, I think, rebranding the naming of the ascension paths that you were talking about earlier. They're no longer called ascension paths. From now on, they're going to be called ambitions.
So you have Ascension perks, which I think, and then you have Ascension paths, and I think that synthetics, cybernetics, biological, and psionics, I think, Ascension paths. The ambition is, so what it says is New Ambition, Defender of the Galaxy. Ambitions are empire-defining journeys that reshape the end game. So becoming the Crisis is one of the current. It's an Ascension perk that you take rather than, I suppose, like a path, if that makes sense. It's just like essentially a negative. And I don't mean negative in a negative way. It's a negative version of the Become the Crisis, isn't it? You rise to become the Defender of the Galaxy. Funny enough, it's called Defender of the Galaxy. Or are they changing? They're changing Ascensions to call them Ambitions. I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
Well, so I think it's somewhere in the middle between us. I think what I had wrong was I was thinking that the ascension paths were things like becoming the crisis because there is a process to do so. It starts up anomaly chains or scenarios in your situation log that you have to interact with in order to do something like completely convert yourself to cybernetics or like one of them is to meld with the shroud, and then wipe out all life, right?
There's different crises depending upon your ascension path, but it's still you still have to become the crisis in order to use that. So you're right. If you become the crisis as a spiritual empire, you become one with the crowd, one with the shroud, and you wipe out the galaxy. If you do it as a machine empire, you design a almost like an arc ship, some sort of weird space needle, and then you go around your empire and pick up everybody, and then you dive into a black hole and destroy the galaxy in that way. So there's a couple of different ways of becoming the crisis linked to the particular ascension path that you're on.
What we're referring to is somewhere around the ascension perks, and it's not the ascension paths because the ascension paths are the trees that you use to get to the ascension perks. So that's not correct on my part. But I think what they're going to do is they're going to separate ascension perks, like the one that makes rare technology more popular or more common. They're going to separate something like that from something that's more gameplay defining. Like they literally have one that's basically, what is it like? It's not called Defender of the Galaxy, but it is. If you take this ascension perk, you deal plus 50% damage to like all in-game crises and mid-game crises, or like, things like that. Or what is it, like Fallen Empires whenever they do a War in Heaven. So they have things like this that they're probably going to rework and put into this ambitions category now. So I think that will include things like becoming the crisis and becoming a Defender of the Galaxy.
So they have ascension perks, ascension paths, and then they have crisis perks as well. Just to confuse things.
Well, sure.
And they all come from the ascension perks tree where you can select them. So, but yeah, I mean,
I think those are going to become ambitions.
So you think they'll change ascension perks to ambitions, but they'll leave ascension paths as ascension paths?
So I think what they'll do is they'll separate it into three things. They'll have the ascension paths to give you ascension perks, but the really gameplay defining ones, like becoming a crisis or now becoming a Defender of the Galaxy, are going to be called ambitions. So I think what they'll do is they'll separate them rather than necessarily do a complete rebranding, but they'll do that in a way to rebrand things like becoming a crisis, because it really is a situation where if you're going to become the crisis, it's like hugely beneficial and it's like super powerful, but you are taking up like half of the available ascension perks just for that. And so it makes sense to separate them. Like you should still maybe try to get all 8 ascension perks and have paths that are suitable for you that doesn't mean you wipe out all life. I think as time goes on, we'll get more ambitions that are going to be things like being a Defender of the Galaxy, but in other ways, things that are better for pacifist empires, things like that. So those would make sense to me as ambitions. And then ascension perks are things like rare technology being more common, things like being able to unlock certain megastructures, things like that.
The Defender of the Galaxy ambition, as it's called, that's included with Nomads. So we'll find out in a month, won't we?
That's true.
I'll tell you what we'll do.
That's true.
What we'll do, gentlemen, is we'll leave it there, and we'll come back to this. We'll come back to this once Nomads is released, and once we've all had an opportunity to be the Defender of the Galaxy and to be a Voidfarer and take our ships on a journey through the galaxy. So, Jack, thanks. Joe, thanks. Appreciated you coming here and giving up your spare time to come and chat to me about strategy games. It's appreciated. This has been the Critical Moves podcast. And if you have enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and like it, share it, leave us a comment, tell us we were great, tell us we were terrible. Just let me know that we're being listened to, because it's nice to know that we're actually being heard. And if you want to come and speak to us, you can do so on Discord. If you go to criticalmovespodcast.com, that's our main website. We put show notes on there, there's articles on there, there's all sorts of stuff on there. It's worth checking out, and all of the links to get in touch with us are on that page as well. So that's criticalmovespodcast.com. Thanks for listening. Take it easy. Goodbye.